Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. So we have that PlayStation showcase later this afternoon, but we're already getting some information coming from Sony, from their financial reports, and we're going to get into more detail into that next. But first I wanted to take a look at this part here, and this is a headline here from VGC. PlayStation says it will soon reveal aggressive plans for cloud gaming. And this was during a business call yesterday with Jim Ryan, and he stated that PlayStation would reveal its plans, quote, over the course of the coming months. And I find it kind of interesting that Sony's now saying they're going to be aggressive towards cloud gaming. This coming after the CMA moves to block Microsoft's acquisition of Activision Blizzard, saying that it would cause harm to competition in the cloud gaming market. But I have to wonder if an announcement like this came out before the CMA's decision, if it would have affected it any. You basically have the number one console maker in the world saying they're going to aggressively pursue cloud gaming. So it doesn't seem like Sony's really worried about not being able to compete with Microsoft in that space. And VGC has part of that call transcribed here. He said, "We observe mobility in gaming habits to be an increasingly important trend, and the cloud will be fundamental to allowing us, or indeed anyone else, to exploit that trend. Unfortunately, today is not the place for me to disclose these plans, but we do have some fairly interesting and quite aggressive plans to accelerate our initiatives in the space of the cloud that will unfold over the course of the coming months." And I think at this point, this is when Master Yoda would say,
"Begun, the cloud wars have."
And that moves us on to the next topic, which is more of a general look at what was announced during that business meeting. And I'm not going to go through every painstaking point of the PowerPoint slide, but I did want to pull out a few interesting points. First, we have a graph here comparing 6 months of 2022 to 6 months of 2023. And of course, May and June here are projected sales, but you can see at least in the first 4 months the hard sales numbers and how much more the PlayStation 5 has been selling compared to last year. And we've definitely seen that in things like the Famitsu sales numbers. So they've definitely gotten those supply chain issues straightened out. And another interesting point here, they look at the catalog of games for PlayStation, and they've got sort of their PlayStation branded stuff in the upper left hand corner here. But then they go into some third-party titles as well as some upcoming releases, and a lot of these are not just for PlayStation. They're out on Xbox as well as some of them coming to the Switch. And I think this is all playing into what seems to be Sony's strategy of marketing third-party titles and making them seem like they're PlayStation exclusives. You just take, for example, Hogwarts Legacy. There was really no marketing on Xbox's side. I think Sony had an exclusive marketing agreement for that, but the game is out on Xbox and is coming to the Switch as long as it doesn't get canceled after a multitude of delays. And then upcoming, you've got Street Fighter 6 coming out on both Xbox and PlayStation, but here it's shown in their portfolio. Now this next graph I find kind of interesting. It's saying that the PlayStation 5 is projected to be ahead of PlayStation 4 on all key metrics by the end of the fiscal year 2023. And again, the last 3 months on these charts are all projected numbers, but the graphs do seem to be kind of accurate in their slope and their trends. And what I find interesting here is I think the PlayStation 5 supply chain issues did affect some of their sales. While console user spend and full game unit sales, the PlayStation 5 is beating the PlayStation 4. When you look at gameplay hours, they're basically the same, but the PlayStation 5 is projected to overtake that in the next few months. But when you look at monthly active users and monthly active consoles, the PlayStation 4 is still beating the PlayStation 5. So there's still a lot of people who haven't switched over to playing on a PlayStation 5 just yet. But they project here for that to kind of switch by the end of the fiscal year, which would be like March of 2024. And then something else interesting, they had several stats and charts here about PlayStation Plus. And you can see this graph here where they break down the different tiers that people are subscribed to, and you see that 30% of the users are now on those top two tiers, the extra and premium, which means 70% are still on essential. Now, I didn't see any numbers about any growth for PlayStation Plus, and that kind of makes me believe, and from the data we've been seeing, that PlayStation Plus hasn't really grown since it revamped last summer. However, with now 30% of its user base on these more expensive tiers, I have no doubt that the service is making more money. And judging by this graph, it looks like more and more people are switching to one of the upper tiers. Of course, as more games get added to it, it becomes more worth the price. And then we come to some information for PlayStation VR 2. And you can see from the graph here that PlayStation VR 2 is outperforming the original PlayStation VR. And the system sold just under 600,000 units in the first 6 weeks, which would be pretty much all the information they have for the end of this last fiscal year. But I do have to point out that they didn't put any projections on this, because it does look like PlayStation VR 2 is kind of sloping a little bit down, where the original PlayStation VR shot up pretty much in a straight line. So I'll be curious to see how this compares at their next quarterly meeting. I have a feeling that the numbers aren't good. We're not going to see a graph like this. And then finally, they touched on a bit of expanding their IPs, similar to what Nintendo did in their fiscal report. And they show here how they're expanding their IPs into movies, TV series. They've got experimental, and I have a picture here of an Uncharted ride, which I'm not real familiar with that. Leave a comment below if you know something about it. And then finally, merchandise, where they've partnered up with Lego to have some Lego sets off of some of their IPs. And I'm sure a lot of this information's in here for investors to see, that they're kind of diversified in their offerings, and how if maybe one industry kind of has a slump, it might be picked up with a different one. But overall, pretty good numbers for PlayStation in this fiscal report. I think the biggest positive coming out of this is that they've solved those supply chain issues, and pretty much if you want a PlayStation 5, you can find somewhere to buy it. Now, I guess we'll just have to wait and see if it's going to be the same thing for the supposed PlayStation Pro that may be out before the end of the year. And next we have just a quick note here about Final Fantasy 16. Many games now get a DLC sometimes announced when the game is even coming out, or at least they have the option to pre-order a DLC that hasn't been revealed yet. Well, at least according to the director of Final Fantasy 16, Hiroshi Takai, we may not get DLC for Final Fantasy 16. You can see the headline here from Game Informer, Final Fantasy 16, there are currently no plans for DLC. And I believe this may have come from an interview during that media event that happened last week. We don't really have any details, but when the director was asked if there was going to be any DLC, he said, "It's a one-off game. We're asking players to pay the full price for this experience, and so we want an experience that's going to be equal the amount of money that the players are going to be paying, and we want them to have satisfaction equal to what they paid or even more than that." Now, I don't think DLC is completely out of the realm of possibility. We had DLC for Final Fantasy 15 as well as Final Fantasy 7 Remake. So I think if the game sells really well, they'll probably look at adding some DLC to it in the future. And I wouldn't be surprised if they already have some ideas and just haven't started working on it yet while they're probably finishing the final touches on the main game. But let me know in the comments below if you think that there will be DLC for Final Fantasy 16, and if there is, how soon do you think we'll see it announced? And finally, while we're on the topic of DLC, we had a free DLC for what I consider an overlooked racing game, and that's Slipstream. You can see the headline here from Nintendo Everything, Slipstream Blue Hour free expansion planned for Switch. Now I believe this is coming out to the other systems that Slipstream's on as well. And the plan is for this expansion to come out sometime this summer, and it'll add 2 game modes, 3 cars, and 5 new tracks with new music for each of those tracks. And the new tracks are set in real-world locations. and these are various locations across Europe. You have Marseille in France, Pompeii, Transylvania, Granada, and Edinburgh. And we have a quote here from the series creator about what blue hour means. The blue hour is a brief period of the day after the sunset, before the night, when the sky takes on a deep blue tone. It's long been appreciated by painters and photographers because of the beautiful and unique properties of light during this time. The fading light from the sun illuminates everything softly, and the deep blue sky creates a great contrast with the unusually yellowish urban lamps. It's a moment of natural beauty that happens every day. Now I have to say that I got a lot of hours of play out of Slipstream. It kind of reminds me of some of the older 2D generation racing games like Rad Racer. And a piece of advice I have, should you decide to play the game, that I think makes it feel so much better, is go ahead and turn on the auto drifting. I know some of you will say that's cheating, but for me it just made the experience much more enjoyable. And the game is only $10, and I've seen it as low as at least $5, so it's a quick, easy pickup that you could spend several hours playing. And since each race usually comprises of a series of different tracks, it won't take you very long to get through it. You can sit down and play one for maybe 10 minutes, and then move on to something else. And that's all we have for today. Did anything we cover catch your attention? And if you liked the video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed yet, consider doing so. Less than 10% of the people who watch my videos are actually subscribed, so it would help the channel out quite a bit. And don't forget, we have that PlayStation showcase this afternoon, and I'll have some updates about that in tomorrow's video. I want to thank you for watching, and be good.